Hey guys, Kiwi here. Today I wanted to discuss Carol's two unexpected visitors during the mid-season finale for The Walking Dead Season 7. I believe that this is setting up a lot of important and interesting story arcs for the show in the near future, so I am incredibly excited to break this down, recap it, and review what we know as I share my full opinions and theorize with you guys. That being said, spoilers for anything in the show up until Season 7 Episode 8, Heart Still Beating, along with possible spoilers for Season 7B. So first off, let's start off when we first see Carol. She's reading a book alone in her home, but hears something outside. She checks to notice Morgan leaving supplies for her, and calls him in even though he fully intended on giving her the privacy that she wants. Morgan enters her house bringing in the supplies that he brought, which consists of fresh fruit harvested from the kingdom. Although Carol appreciates Morgan's friendship, showing by her calling him over, letting him in, and asking him how he is, she is still obviously annoyed by the fact that people keep appearing on her doorstep. I say this especially considering that stockpile of fruit in her bedroom, which implies that King Ezekiel has been visiting her as well. As Carol finally rushes Morgan out of the door, she gets another unwanted visitor as Richard greets her along with Morgan, telling them that they need to talk. Now, he didn't know that Morgan would be there as well, but he says that that's convenient because he should hear what he has to say too. Morgan and Carol then proceed to listen to his entire proposition, which is quite a bit, so let's start from the beginning. So we first hear his original experiences with the zombie apocalypse, and what he went through, which honestly reminded me a lot of the first two seasons of the show in general, actually.
A lot of places came together after the world fell apart. Maybe you're both from one of those places. Most of those communities and camps are gone now.
Richard explains that he's been a part of multiple different communities before he discovered the kingdom, and throughout that process he lost his entire family and watched them die on top of it, so I guess him and Morgan have a little something in common.
I lost people, pretty much lost hope in people. I had a family. I lost it to this world. Saw them die.
Now that is sad to hear, yes, but at this point in time, everyone has lost someone. So honestly, everyone knows what it's like nowadays if you're still around, that is. Whether it's someone you care about before the apocalypse, or if it's someone you met afterwards, you've known someone that you've cared about and you've had them die. At this point, it would be completely bizarre to find a survivor that hasn't experienced this. You would have to be a complete hermit like Morgan's mentor Eastman from episode 604 to even have a chance at being that secluded. So anyways, once Richard found Ezekiel and saw what he had set up at the kingdom, he jumped on board out of amazement and has since been doing everything that he can to help it thrive and succeed. Richard truly believes in the kingdom being a successful community, and he wants it to be the last community that he ever has to join. I'm sure Richard would love Alexandria just as much as the kingdom. My point being is that he just wants people to live and thrive in general, without the threat of the Saviors or any other gangs or groups. The apocalypse has done enough to everyone already. Richard goes on to explain how the kingdom met the Saviors for the first time. Apparently, King Ezekiel and his men met them out in the woods only a few months back.
A few months back, Ezekiel and a few guards met a group of them in the woods. Saviors recognized Ezekiel's capabilities, and Ezekiel didn't want to fight, so they cut a deal.
I'm unsure as to what exactly happened between them as far as an altercation goes, but Richard says that they recognized Ezekiel's skills. This could have been from a wide variety of reasons, whether it was his leadership skills, his combat abilities, his way with words, or even the simple fact that he could have had Shiva with him to flaunt around. They decided to make a very generous deal with him. We heard Benjamin tell Morgan all of this back in 702, but as a refresher device to the fans disguised as a tool to bring Carol up to speed, the deals with the Saviors happen outside of the kingdom at a drop-off zone, and the Saviors have agreed to never step foot within the kingdom itself. Because of this, Ezekiel has actually hidden the entirety of the Saviors from about 99% of the kingdom's residents, aside from a select few, which probably includes all of his top soldiers. Ezekiel knows that the few of his people who do know about the trade hate putting up with the idea, and if anyone else in his community ever knew about it, they would all want to gather up and rebel against it. Just like most of the main characters on the show, Richard knows that something needs to be done regarding the Saviors, and he asks for help from Carol and Morgan on convincing Ezekiel to attack them. From Richard's perspective, he obviously can't sleep at night knowing that there's a group of zombie apocalypse bullies secretly terrorizing them. Apparently, it's only been a few months for him since the introduction to the idea of the Saviors. Now to Richard, it feels like the kingdom could literally be attacked at any moment just for the hell of it, and his people would have no idea that the Saviors even exist in the first place. He lists off a variety of reasons that could possibly set off the Saviors, giving them enough reason to do something out of hand. The Saviors have a very short temper, and because of Negan's hierarchy, everyone stepping on everyone, they all hate being defied in any way. All of that being said, even if you treat the saviors properly, they could still just one day end up attacking you if they decided you were useless or too much of a threat. Carol has heard enough and gets the point, but she wants to know why Richard has come to talk to her about it. She already knew that she was going to turn down any sort of call for help because of the same reason that she left Alexandria. Carol doesn't want to fight anymore, she doesn't want to murder anymore, and it's messed with her head like any normal person. She's fed up with it all and wants to completely avoid it by running away. If Carol was going to truly do that, then she would skip states to a completely different area of America before settling down. But the fact is that she is so close by to the kingdom, along with the same general area as everyone else, suggests that she has the safety net of being able to go back to either community if she decides to stop being so stubborn and wants to live alongside society again. And so Richard, being completely unaware of Carol's past, tells her that she probably hasn't been involved with a lot of violence, but gets told otherwise. Carol is an amazing fighter, as we all know, but she just doesn't want to get involved with starting the war that Richard's proposing.
Carol, I imagine that violence and fighting is something you haven't been a part of.
You're wrong.
You're very wrong.
And the way he yells at Morgan, telling him that we need to take their lives to save ours, reminds me of Rick back in Season 6, convincing Alexandria to attack one of Negan's outposts, the satellite compound. Morgan is right, and he's trying to prevent exactly what ended up happening to Rick and group during the Season 7 premiere, as Richard doesn't know that attacking the Saviors would work. Morgan doesn't even know any of that stuff has happened yet, and Richard is completely unaware of Alexandria at this point, so this is literally the same situation we've seen practically repeating itself, just with different people. Richard honestly gets more and more aggressive as the conversation goes on, which is completely uncalled for, and as he leaves, he tries to put the weight of many people dying in the future on their shoulders, along with accusing them with the possibility of being used to it.
When they turn on us, and they will, that blood is gonna be on your hands.
But maybe you're both used to that.
I believe that he came over to that house fully expecting them to cooperate. He didn't want to leave that house with a no, and I'm starting to think that he didn't even consider it a possibility when the door opened for him. We later see Richard sneak inside of a small hidden trailer stashed full of supplies. It seems like Richard's paranoia shows to be greater by the minute, as he is well equipped to get the hell out of Dodge if he ever needs to. He throws a little fit in there, but eventually gets over himself. Is this room foreshadowing for the future? Let me know what you guys think. Carol tells Morgan to leave immediately after Richard, to which he complies as he seems somewhat offended by the stubbornness of Carol's decisions. She tells him to lie about where she is if he ever sees anyone that they know, and all Morgan has to say in response is the fact that he never meant for Carol to see him when he was dropping off the supplies in the first place. So just briefly touching on something that Richard said, would there actually be blood on the hands of Morgan and Carol if they honestly refuse to fight in this upcoming war? Well, yeah, kind of, but right now they aren't fully aware of the actual situation at hand, and I feel like once they both get a nudge in the right direction that they'll be able to jump on board. Morgan, Carol, and Richard honestly created such a unique dynamic because when Richard arrives, Morgan and Carol take the same position, but they aren't on the same side. For Morgan, he's reluctant to even respond because all that this means is that he's gonna have to bring up his beliefs again and mention Akibdo and the fact that he doesn't kill, which is the one thing that Richard is actually asking him to do. Lenny James even mentions this on Talking Dead, explaining how Morgan is worried that his conflicting views may alter his living position. If he can't agree with Richard, will he still be able to comfortably live at the kingdom? Morgan initially enjoyed the place so much because Ezekiel disagreed about fighting, everyone seemed so peaceful and thriving, along with people like Benjamin, who actually show an interest in his beliefs. So when I just had heard Lenny James say this after I had first watched the mid-season finale, I thought, nah, Morgan doesn't have to worry about where he's living. Richard's the only one that feels this way, and he hasn't even convinced Ezekiel of it yet. But actually, in the trailers for Season 7B, we see Jesus bringing everyone from the hilltop that's, at the hilltop at the end of 708 to the kingdom. So it seems like a possible alliance may form. And if everyone there wants to fight and Morgan's the only one that doesn't, yeah, maybe he'll feel secluded and maybe he'll want to leave. And we'll get more into all of that a little bit later in the video, but first off, I just wanted to quickly mention that Carol is in a position right now that so many other people would die to be in. She came from Alexandria, she knows Rick better than most people, and she just so happened to discover the kingdom alongside Morgan, which actually saved her life, by the way. She knows that they are also having altercations with the Saviors, and she decides to keep Alexandria a secret and to stay out of it. This is incredibly selfish, honestly, in my opinion, as anyone else would be suggesting something along the lines of an alliance right away. And I especially say this because as we hear Sasha say to Enid how she says it feels like she's the only one that wants to fight, whether it's her or Maggie or Enid or Carl or Michonne, Rosita, Eugene, or even Father Gabriel, they would all realize that if they brought both communities together, along with the possibility of maybe some people from Hilltop with Jesus as well, that they would actually have a standing chance. And this all relates to a point during my main review of episode 708, but essentially, all of the characters I just listed off have been trying so hard to secretly rebel in their own way. I didn't know how exactly this would happen, but it all seems to get tied together perfectly as Michonne finally breaks through to Rick in 708, causing him to see things the way everyone else does now, meaning that they don't have to keep their true intentions a secret anymore. The showrunners could only stretch out that disconnect for so long, as we finally see the group united again by the end of 708 and probably heading to the kingdom during 709. That brings us back to what we were talking about earlier and also brings up my next subject, which has to do with the future actions of Carol and Morgan and the kingdom in general. During Talking Dead for 708, Chris Hardwick asked the following question to Robert Kirkman: why hasn't Morgan gone back to Alexandria yet to let Rick know that he's found Carol? To which he responds saying that Morgan is just being respectful of Carol's wishes and that she just wants to be left alone. Although it's true that Morgan doesn't want to mention Carol out of respect, would he consider going back to Alexandria and talking to Rick regardless? Actually, I was originally theorizing that Morgan would decide to go back himself, possibly after talking it through with Ezekiel and Richard, but that pretty much all changes now as we know that Jesus is already aware of Ezekiel, as we see him bringing Rick to the kingdom in the brand new previews for Season 7B in February 2017. So pretty much everyone who's at the hilltop at the end of 708 gets brought to the kingdom with Jesus. We hear multiple clips of Rick actually talking to Ezekiel trying to convince him to join Alexandria along with the hilltop and fight the saviors.
Alexandria, the hilltop, the kingdom. Our communities have something in common. We all serve the saviors.
Join us in fighting the Walking Dead.
Now, honestly, I want to save the topic for talking about all the different communities possibly fighting alongside each other for another time. But right now, let's focus on the kingdom's presence in 7B and their introduction to Alexandria themselves. Right now, what I'm trying to take from all of this is the fact that Jesus is the key factor here that brings together Rick and Ezekiel, not necessarily Morgan. But what this does tell me is that he will in fact find out about Glenn, Abe, and everything else that has occurred in 7A. So is this enough reason to sneak away and tell Carol? Even if she doesn't want to get involved, is the news of all the events in Season 7A, along with the possible idea of an alliance with Alexandria, enough to push Carol to change her motives and start being useful again? In her head, I imagine she's considered telling Alexandria or trying to form the communities together, but she just honestly has no interest in the kingdom whatsoever, and doesn't want to be involved in either of their conflicts. As selfish as that sounds, it's honestly just the truth, and I feel like Carol wouldn't necessarily care about an alliance between them, as she would probably just get annoyed if that was all Morgan tried coming and telling her. And I only say that because mainly she wouldn't understand the full gravity of the situation. I believe that even though Carol would be initially pissed off again at seeing someone from Alexandria because of Morgan, or even Morgan himself once more, she'll understand it and make an exception if she gets delivered the news about Glenn and Abraham. Is this all enough to possibly cause her to turn around by the end of Season 7? How will Morgan feel about all this? Let me know what you guys feel in the comments section below, and feel free to leave a like on the video if you've enjoyed it at all. I sure know that Richard will be happy that Rick is appearing at his doorstep asking Ezekiel to fight with him, as that's what he wanted Carol and Morgan to help him do. Maybe Morgan being there will help Rick trust Ezekiel more, or vice versa. Who knows, guys, but thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.